The British budget came out yesterday, much hoo-ha about it, and it was billed as a growth budget, but was it really? To try and throw some light on the budget, Sandy Shipton, Focus Chair for Banking and Finance at the British Business Group, has joined us in the studio. Good morning to you, Sandy. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Malcolm.
I guess people listening on their way to work will be interested in, or at least British expatriates will be interested to know what's in it for me. I mean, is it going to affect me in any way in terms of tax for me? Does it affect people working in this part of the world who are non-resident UK nationals?
I think the top line is not at all. I think there's been a great deal of mystery surrounding both administrations in relationship to expatriates, but so far there's been no actual concrete statement. I think what is more likely is that so-called tax loopholes are increasingly going to be closed.
We do see a crackdown here on tax avoidance. Is that just a continuation of what the government was doing anyway?
Yes, it is, and it's not just the UK administration, it's very much worldwide and Euro-wide. Of course, administrations everywhere are trying to raise revenues to bridge their deficits.
I mean, to be more specific, what they actually said in the budget was to tackle tax avoidance, including action to prevent attempts to disguise employment income, and they want to raise about £4 billion over the life of this Parliament by actually sort of tracking down people who aren't paying enough tax as well. Do you think they're really talking about people with, offshore money who are sort of living and spending more time than they should in the UK, rather than sort of, salarymen, if you like, working in this part of the world?
Well, I believe it's very much a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I think that we've observed that there have been a number of cases in the last year or two, perhaps trophy cases, where significant expatriates, Brits, have lived overseas, and they've basically been on the wrong side of the line. This is a very technical and complex area. I think for the working expatriate UK person who happens to be living overseas, who has done all that he ought to have done, or she ought to have done, to have given up their residence in the UK. So effectively, if they're not ordinary resident and they're living overseas on a proper contract of employment, there are no issues in relation to paying UK tax. But on the other hand, there are, of course, increasingly very wealthy UK nationals who've lived overseas and have probably taken advantage of what could be seen to be loopholes. Part of this new budget, they've heralded a simplification of the system, and in doing so they've actually removed something like 43 so-called reliefs and allowances. But what they are doing, and this is interesting, they're putting out to the professions, the various accounting professions and others, to put forward recommendations for simplification. So there's this kind of a two-way dialogue going on between the administration and the private sector.
Well, a number of commentators this morning have said that the budget is good for business. One saying that it shows that the UK is open for business. What does it mean for foreign businesses, for foreign investment?
Well, I think that's one of the key areas that the administration are now trying to herald. We've seen successive ministers coming to the Gulf and other parts of the world. I think what they're trying to do is to stabilise the fears that have been aroused. Frankly, I'm not in agreement, because I think the res but non-dom community have been, again, given some bad news. Previously, the one charge of £30,000 has been increased up to £50,000. They've just lengthened the period of so-called residence in the UK to 12 years. I think this, if I may say, is the stable door has long been open, and I think that those are very much wealth generators. Many of these families and individuals may continue to leave the country. In terms of local impact, capital gains tax has been increased, so that has a negative effect. But I think also corporation tax going down over the next 3 to 4 years is of some benefit to business in the UK, not necessarily foreign overseas investment.
That was going to be my next question, because the cut to corporation tax has been increased, so it's going to go down by 2% rather than 1% as originally planned in April. But you're saying that won't necessarily affect foreign companies, such as companies from the GCC operating in the UK?
Well, it will have a marginal effect. I think countered with that will be, for example, significant enterprises in the UK are financial institutions, they're going to be hit with the bank levy. That bank levy, of course, is not specified, but it's a large number. Also, within many sectors, very wealthy income earners are being clobbered with the 50% rate of tax. And, of course, we all know there was this big sort of surcharge last year. I think, in fact, they have to be very careful how they deal with this segment of industry.
Well, as you said, they've reduced corporation tax by 2%. They've done quite a bit for small to medium-sized businesses. They've doubled the size of entrepreneurs relief to 10 million. They're funding 21 new enterprise zones. I'm not quite sure how those compete with the RDAs, the regional development agencies, which are disappearing next year. Whether they're just replacing them in a different form, I'm not sure. But interestingly enough, and I know that from friends of mine who've had small businesses in the UK, they're actually going to review the rafts of health and safety legislation that's expensive and cumbersome, especially to small businesses. And that's really one of the things that has actually forced a lot of businesses to go under, really, because they can't afford to comply with all the health and safety legislation. So that seems to me a pretty big move, but I haven't seen other people picking up on it.
Well, I agree with that. I think administration costs, compliance costs are always burdensome for small businesses, and there is, without a question, an emphasis in moving into that segment to offer more help. Simplification is going to help, because normally it is the business enterprise that has to actually fathom the many rules and regulations. I think one other major policy change is the merging of national insurance and income tax. This is something which has been talked about now for the last 8 months since the new administration came into power. We're waiting to see how that's going to come out. But of course, the theory is that it will merge a tax, as well as tax credits, by the way. I think it's worth commenting here that the middle-income mum, so to speak, has been hit, partly because tax credit has been clawed back, and it's also taken a segment of people in the sort of 40 to 50,000 sterling income bracket into surcharge, the 40% level. So, in some respects, that middle ground of the UK are slightly worse off.
Did George Osborne, did the Chancellor have a lot of choice in this budget? I mean, he didn't have a lot of cash to give away. We've got a coalition government, which I think the Telegraph this morning is saying sort of ties his hands as well. What do you think?
I agree, Brandy. He has very little wriggle room. I must applaud his fortitude, because in actual fact, he inherited a very difficult chalice, if I may say, to start with. He's given a small bit back in terms of fuel tax, I think a penny a litre. But I feel that with the deficit reduction absolutely primary in the government's mind, they've stuck to their mettle. They've, I think, taken the view that if they were to retreat, they'd probably lose all credibility. So this is a very tough budget, and I think one pundit said it's a tax and grab is the real story, rather than a budget for growth.
One of our analysts earlier this morning was saying that, despite them saying it's a budget for growth,